So this physical reality that we are experiencing throughout our lives is, again, like just one level of reality.
Yeah.
And one level of reality with the physical existence, physical, like 10,000 things.
Yes.
Like,
So like what Gaudapada and Shankara would say is, a sparsha, you're not touching the objects, right, of your mind especially, but you're also not touching the subject of the one who experiences those objects. You're not touching the subject or the object. That's what a sparsha is. So when you follow that line of thought or that way of practice, what's then left? So this idea of there is only Brahman, especially from the Advaita Vedantic perspective of Gaudapada and Shankara, can be very fearful for a lot of people who don't understand the knowledge and are not trained in especially Advaita Vedanta. And Gaudapada actually speaks about this in the Mandukya Upanishad Karaka. And so it states, this yoga, a sparsha yoga, which is not in touch with anything, is hard to be attained by all yogis in general. The yogis are afraid of it, for they see fear in it where there is really fearlessness. The yogis here see fear in the end of, in this sparsha yoga, because they themselves fear the end of their own individual consciousness, their own individual experience. That's kind of a step almost too far for them to comprehend. There's a lot of fear that arises there.
is that the fear that, like, their own existence, if that existence gets annihilated?
Annihilated, yeah. Yeah, they fear that. And see, what Gaudapada and Shankara are trying to explain to the yogis is that fear can only arise in duality. It happens through sparsha, through touch. That's why Gaudapada says in the end, they see fear in it where there is really fearlessness. Because once you've come to that sparsha state, you're in a non-dual state. You're all that is, all that ever was. You're not the story anymore. You've merged with Brahman. No fear can arise because there's no touch. Because fear can only arise through touch. And for a lot of people in general, that's a step too far. Because one thing that a lot of people fear most on the spiritual path is the end of their story, their own individual consciousness. What about the one who's done all this spiritual practice for the years, and I've attained certain siddhis and samadhis, and what about me? Shouldn't I get some recognition?
I think deepest fear arises from us not knowing. Like, not knowing of anything gives you fear, I think. That's why biggest fear, people say biggest fear for anyone is death. Because after death, you don't know what's happening. If there is anything to happen, what's next? Nobody knows. And literally nobody knows. We can only speculate.
Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown, yes. That's what it is. I think, again, like you mentioned before, like, what about me? What about all this knowledge I've learned and this and that? And, like, what about my own existence and this and that? Then end of your own existence, and then what? That's, and also like a fear of losing so-called your own existence.
Yeah, your own identity.
Yes, that's right. Again, psychologically, we build our own identity associating with relationship and environment, right? So once your immediate environment, whatever environment that create your identity, and the people around you, relationships that created identity of yourself are under threat, you become anxious. You have a bit of a breakdown somewhat, like, who am I, why am I doing this? And you start questioning these things, which is, I think, is very good.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's then this fear comes in, like, what's the place for me in this world, this kind of thing. Again, we always find ourselves in the relation-based.
Yeah.
But this one is a break completely out of all of that. So initially, I think there is fear for anyone. But again, like in the Upanishad said, that actually there is only fearlessness. Because once even your existence gets evaporated to that nothingness, what's there?
Yeah.
Nothing, really. So that this dual existence, dual reality is only from our illusion, deluded perception, which is very limited. But then once you go above that, once we realize that there is only Brahman,
There's only Brahman. Yeah.
then there's nothing to fear of, right?
No. And like you were saying, with the fear of that arises with relationships, what's the crux of that? Attachment.
Yep.
So see, with sparsha, with touch, there is attachment. So we're attached to knowledge we have, people we know, everything. We are, like you said before, we're stuck. Our mind is like super glue on everything. And so we are attached then to especially the relationships, the human relationships we have, and the relationship we have ultimately with ourselves or our story. That's the ultimate attachment. Because with that attachment, then you can be attached to other things. And so Asparsha is saying to detach from that story. With that one thought, you resolve all other attachments, you see.
It's a very important point, but it's also extremely difficult to do it, I think. Because, like, again, whatever circumstance that's happening around you, or right now, or in the past, that creates a certain image in yourself with the emotional experience that you had at that very moment. So whatever similar situation happens, that same emotion comes up. Or vice versa. You have a similar emotion, you experience a similar emotion, then that very specific experience, it comes up from your memory. So it's very quick and split second of subconscious mind behavior, I think.
Yes.
But we need to cut that chain.
Yeah.
But that's inevitable. That's no option, I think. You have to. That's why this study is important. That's why these spiritual disciplines are important.
Yeah. See, to what you're saying, and also to what the yogis were saying, they can handle death, but they can't handle death while living. To become a jivan mukta, they can't handle to be liberated in this life, which means you have to kill your story. The story of yourself has to die, which then resolves all the attachments. But accepting this death is
very difficult.
It's difficult because, as the yogis point out, you fear the death of your own individual consciousness. Doesn't mean you won't have this sort of subjective experience. It means that the story is ended, though. So the identity itself may still exist, but it's the belief in the identity that's died.